Blog Talk Radio.
Did you know there's a secret place to expand your mind? A place to escape the same old negative news? Welcome to Colombo Chronicles Live with Rose Colombo, award-winning author, cable TV and radio host, poet, and advocate for justice. Rose has been seen and heard on local and national TV and radio. She's consulted with victims of injustice for more than 20 years. Her articles have been published in major and local newspapers and magazines. Listen live as Rose Colombo welcomes prominent authors and experts to her podcast every Wednesday from noon to 1 p.m. Pacific Time at blogtalkradio.com/Colombo Chronicles. You can call in and ask questions at 646-564-9742. Follow Rose Colombo every Wednesday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. on Colombo Chronicles Live at blogtalkradio.com/Colombo Chronicles.
Hi, everyone. It's the Rose Colombo, right here for you.
Colombo Chronicles Live. Colombo is on their trail. Listen up at Colombo Chronicles Live.
Keeping up with the news these days is like keeping up with the car. Well, you get the idea. There's a lot of yelling and screaming. Intelligent discussion, not so much. Ready for something refreshing, thought-provoking, and friendly? Okay, grab your favorite hot or cold drink, sit down, and listen to a friendly voice. The Colombo Chronicles Live with Rose Colombo on Blog Talk Radio. Every Wednesday night at 8 on the West Coast, or 11 for anyone sleepless on the East Coast, Rose Colombo welcomes dynamic authors and experts on a myriad of human interest topics. From politics to love, the environment, the mafia, healthcare, and more. It's 60 minutes of original entertainment and intriguing information with the top VIP guests. Senator John DeCamp exposing the Franklin cover-up, Dr. Tony O'Donnell, the Herb Doc, Dr. Alan Keyes discussing the White House. So, from Rose Colombo's home on the Colombo Chronicles Live to your home, Colombo says she doesn't want to have to send the familia to make sure you are listening.
That's right. We don't have to send the familia to make sure you are listening.
Colombo Chronicles Live. Colombo is on their trail. Listen up at Colombo Chronicles Live.
Hello, world, and welcome, America. Welcome, world. It is one nation under God in the USA. And today I want to welcome each of you to Colombo Chronicles Live. And all shows are archived, or most shows are archived, I should say, for your listening convenience. You can always come back and listen to your favorite author and expert and your favorite topic. Before I tell you about our special guest, his name is Roger Colley, I would like to dedicate the show to my mother, Maria Green, Maria Colombo Green, who recently passed away, and she will be missed by family and so many friends and coworkers, even after she retired, who remained in touch, and all her golfing buddies and her political friends. But mostly by me and my family, who will celebrate her life. She has her own legend and her own story and her own journey. My mother, Maria Colombo Green, believed in God and she was a strong Christian Catholic woman. She was a feminist before her time. As a little girl, I remember when my dad was taking a nap, she would take the keys off the dresser and she would drive around the block, teaching herself how to drive. She was a 2-term president of the National Federation Republican Women's Club of North Long Beach. And she met many politicians and celebrities, hobnobbed, and supported many of those politicians on the right. She was an invited guest of President and Mrs. Nixon at a luncheon at the White House with the presidents of the Republican Women's Clubs. And also she met Danny Thomas on that trip because they made a trip over to New York City to the famous restaurant Reuben's, where she had lunch with her friends and Danny Katamas. And she was a guest of the Reagans at the governor's ball when he was elected governor. So she has her own legacy, and she loved to cook, and she loved country western music. She loved to dance and laugh, and she made us laugh many, many times. And we will always remember to always dance and laugh just like my mother. She loved family, country, God, and people. She was a people person. And so we will celebrate her life, and we will always have her in our hearts and our spirits, as well as her friends. And that was a great life that she left here with her mark on the world. So my point to this is, if you have parents and children and grandparents, be sure to call them, visit them, let them know you care. Tell them you love them, support them, help them. And in the end, what you have is you have family and you have memories and you have pictures, hopefully. And maybe you have even some videos. Be sure to take videos, ask them about their lives, because you only get the opportunity to know about people and your family while they're alive. And you only have that time to tell them that you love them and care about them, or to do random acts of kindness for them. So you will be surprised how your parents and your grandparents are walking history of the United States of America, and that how they represent what has happened in the past to keep everyone else free and be examples of what a great nation and a great people live in the United States of America, who love America and are loyal to America. And get involved like my mother did. Get involved and work towards making it a better world for future generations. And on that note, we're going to enter into the world of authors and experts. I'm going to tell you about our very special guest when we come back in just a moment, Roger Colley. And he has lived the American dream, and he's going to tell us about his latest book. So don't touch that dial. We will be back in just a moment.
Howdy, folks. Just stopped in by my favorite restaurant, the Horseshoe Cafe. I highly recommend the home-cooked hot meals and piping hot coffee. In fact, it reminds me of my mom's home cooking when I was growing up. The customer service is excellent. Be sure to save room for the world's best desserts. Make sure you try a slice of fresh homemade pie. The Horseshoe Cafe is located at 154 East 4th Street in the heart of Benson, Arizona. The Horseshoe Cafe is right outside of Tombstone, Sierra Vista, and Tucson. Sometimes Patty and Mike stop by to welcome you. The staff at the Horseshoe Cafe looks forward to seeing you. Stop by to eat or relax. Cool down in the desert with a cold beer or your favorite cocktail. That's the Horseshoe Cafe. Oh, and don't tell anyone I told you, but some people think it's haunted. One thing is for sure. Be sure to bring your appetite.
Colombo Chronicles Live. Colombo is on their trail. Listen up at Colombo Chronicles Live.
Yes, you're listening to the Rose Colombo. So listen up on Colombo Chronicles Live, because we have a dynamic guest. His name is Roger Colley. He's a returning guest. He hasn't been with us for a while, but we're so happy that he's back in Santa Barbara, California. He's lived the American dream, born in South Philadelphia, became the president of 2 public companies and a trustee of the wonderful and famed the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He attended Duke University and graduated from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. Semi-retired. I don't know if you ever retired. I don't even know what that word means. Semi-retired. He resides in suburban Philadelphia and Santa Barbara, California. His website is Roger Colley, 2 L's, rogercolley.com. So you have the option to look up Roger Colley and his new popular book, Forging a New America, How American Liberalism and Climate Change Landed Us in Siberia. So this is going to be fun and interesting and educational and enlightening. So don't touch that dial. And why don't we just go ahead and welcome Roger Colley to Colombo Chronicles. Hi, Roger. How are you today?
Hi, Rose. Thank you very much. Good to be with you again.
You too. And we're so happy to have you here to talk about your American dream and also about your book, Forging a New America. And first of all, why don't you tell our audience the reason you wrote your book, and because your subtitle is interesting. And, of course, we want to know how you came up with Siberia.
Well, Rose, I am very motivated about this story. Yes, I have lived the American dream. Started way back as a personal story. My dad came here when he was only 2 years old, an Italian immigrant. His dad was a carpenter, and they were welcoming skilled labor at that time. I guess this is about 1904. His dad only lived 12 years, though, and my dad's mom never spoke one word of English. My dad had 5 younger brothers and sisters. In the First World War, he was build ships at the Navy Yard in Philadelphia, in South Philadelphia, and he read a book, and how enlightening. Just reading one book spurred him to read more books, and he eventually got himself into college. And he got himself through college, worked hard, and really lived the American dream. My mom worked hard, too. She taught first grade in inner city Philadelphia, teaching blacks and Puerto Ricans how to write better and speak better. A very dedicated woman. And the two of them saved enough money to put my brother and myself into Ivy League schools, Princeton and Penn. So with that experience, I know what America is all about. And recently I felt that I even have a grandson who's quite a progressive. And but being related, we can talk intelligently together. We don't get mad at each other. But I think he's wrong. He thinks I'm wrong. I tell him that what really has progressed in the United States is not his government progressiveness, which is occurring right now, but capitalism has progressed. 100 years ago, labor was just a cost. And look at what's happened in the last 100 years, where medium and larger corporations have many, many benefits, disability insurance, life insurance, pension plans, time off. And it's a shame that we haven't gotten these benefits to the small companies yet, but that has to happen eventually. So my feeling is it's not government that's going to provide benefits. Government is inefficient. It becomes corrupt. We look at the experience of socialism over time, Russia, communist China, Cuba, Venezuela. And China only became prosperous for a couple of 100 million of their people when they created about 8 capitalist zones about 35, 40 years ago. That's what really spurred China. But yet the communists have to remain in control, and you can see they're clamping down on Hong Kong and with their population. And that's what socialism does. It means a corrupt elite group of leaders. You remember Animal Farm way back in 1946, where the British socialist was afraid that Stalin was getting way too much credit. And because he helped us defeat Hitler, he was getting a lot of credit. But that author did not want to see that type of socialism come to England. So he was really preaching a very democratic, pure socialism, which never worked. And Margaret Thatcher had to reverse a lot of that. Sweden is reversing a lot of their socialistic tendencies. So, Rose, that's my motivation and why I feel so really good about this book, because what I do is I point out a story in fiction. Rose, there's a lot of being written today criticizing both sides of what's going on in the political spectrum. But my book is 12 years from now as to what America could look like if we had socialism in the United States. I have 18 chapters devoted, each chapter is devoted to one item, problem with one-party rule. What happens to the healthcare community when you don't have the incentives for doctors to really work hard after all their years of study if they just become government employees. And I go through about 18 of these things. So I think it's an interesting story. As I mentioned, it's personal, and my motive really is to see the American dream be preserved, and that's what I'm pushing here.
Well, you mentioned Siberia, and Siberia have a large number of poor Jews and Russians, and these Jewish elderly people don't realize they have to go out in their 80s, 90s, and they have to find wood to keep them warm during the winter and store that wood. And they are poor, and they need nourishment, and many of them are neglected. And so when you said you said how did you come up with Siberia? It really touches me, because Siberia is an example of what happens with communism, Marxism, and socialism, in my opinion. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, very few people understand and know that Russia, by far, is the largest country in the world geographically. And just Siberia, part of Russia, the eastern part of Russia, is larger than the entire African continent. And Russia has been pushing more and more of their pot towards Siberia, right? Most of them are poor. And you will learn from the first page. I can tell you this because it's in the first page of my book. A very rich American, a billionaire, goes to the oligarchs in Russia and makes a deal and said, the best way we can produce wealth for you is send our top American geologist to Siberia, where they've got diamonds, gold, oil, gas. They have everything. It's the richest mineral deposits in the world, a lot of it trapped under the permafrost. So what I do, I link a little bit of this gradual warming period that we're having, and our American geologists are able to recover a lot of those minerals and pay a royalty to the Russian government. So they like that because they're getting money. What we did in this novel, this is fiction now, but you'll learn from the very beginning, we get 20 million Americans there very quickly, and they give us, in return for the royalty we're giving them, they give us these big parcels of land, and we put 20 million Americans there, and the local Russians are so happy to have us because of what you just said. We teach them how to progress and how the American dream can work for them as well. So the Russians in these zones are happy. The 20 million Americans are happy. We create kind of a fictional, perfect government there. And then the story comes back to the United States. So we've got this 95-year-old man called Papa Bear. Could be me, but I don't use my name. We have this 95-year-old man telling a story to one of his great-grandsons in Siberia about two things, about how good things are in these new zones in Siberia where the Americans are and where the Russians welcomed us and they're progressing. And then there's another great-grandson going to the University of Pennsylvania who has a girlfriend. And in their freshman year, they don't have any political ideas. But in that freshman year, the boy becomes very conservative. His girlfriend becomes very progressive. So here's the argument going on in the United States today, Rose, and your listeners. We have this argument between what the progressives can do through a bigger government, a welfare system, and the conservatives who believe that, hey, capitalism can do this if you do it right, and we can progress without the government doing it. So you've got that argument going on. That just picture 12 years out now, the progressives kind of win the game in the United States. So we have all these problems in the United States, and here's this poor kid at Penn trying to say, what's going on? Am I going to have to go to Siberia with my great-grandfather and get out of this mess, or what can I do about it? Meanwhile, his girlfriend is saying, oh, well, things aren't perfect, but they will be perfect. Just give us a chance, and things will be perfect. So the two are arguing back and forth, even though they're in love, which is kind of difficult, right? And that helps create the story. And then you'll meet a close friend of the kid, 1 year senior to him, and he gets hooked on drugs. And so there's a story of a guy where one of the chapters, of course, here is that drugs become so prevalent in the United States, it's so easy to get them, and there's so many drug addicts. And if you listen to the progressives, they say, well, what we just need is more counseling. We need more drug addiction programs to help these people. But, Rose, there aren't enough qualified people, qualified social workers to turn a lot of these people around. And that's a major problem, and it gets even worse out 12 years from now. So you'll find out what happens to that kid. It's not good. And then you have a professor, another chapter is on academia. Yeah, I know you're very aware, Rose, as your listeners are, that academia is almost solid left. I think the ratio is 12-1 of the academics in colleges that are very liberal and progressive versus conservative. It's a huge ratio, 12-1.
I know that for a fact because I'm sorry, but I know that for a fact because I've returned to taking classes every once in a while, and they changed dramatically over the years.
Yes.
Because I'm always taking classes, and then my granddaughter graduated not so long ago from a university here in California, and in political science, and we're so proud of her. And but they invited us to go sit in on class, right? So we did, and I was just amazed at all of the restrictions. Like, I asked the professor, I said, I don't understand how you cannot talk about Christians today in a classroom, but you can talk about every other religion, which they did. Yeah. And he said, I'll talk to you about that after class. I said, okay, you got a deal. But I saw this discrimination.
You're a co-author of my book. There is a chapter just like that where the professor kind of backs off and says, well, we'll talk about that later. We don't want to talk about that now. Yeah, that's what's going on.
Not in the classroom. It was an eye-opener.
In real life, my one grandson went to, raised in San Francisco, went to NYU, and he admitted any professor speaker was never allowed to come on campus. That's like taboo at very liberal NYU. And I asked him, have you studied all sides of this question? He said, yeah, I've studied all sides of the question, and I'm really with Bernie Sanders in all this. We need to make change, and we need an intervention, and it looks like only the government can do that. So this kid, is sold on that avenue. Meanwhile, I have another grandson at the University of Delaware that just joined the Young Conservatives and the Young Republicans. And so I've got this dichotomy here between two grandsons, one on one side, one on the other side. But you're 100% correct. That's what goes on in these classrooms today. And they'll admit it. It's generally known. And that's why I want this book out as a way of whoever reads it, hopefully, we get the country back in balance again. And I'm looking forward to the November congressional elections. And I don't have to say that this book is only for conservatives. This book is also for moderate Democrats so that they see what could happen if you go too far towards this progressive agenda. There's history here showing it doesn't work. And that's my point here. So my book hopefully can appeal to any moderate American voter. Particularly those in the middle who are trying to decide which way to go.
Well, the name of the book is Forging a New America, and it's by Roger Colley, who we're speaking to, the author. And what's interesting about this is I think the people who really need to read it, besides the conservatives and the middle conservatives and Democrats and so forth are the liberals. I think, those who really have an argument for liberalism, progressivism, really need to read books such as Forging a New America, because unless you read both sides of the story, you cannot have an objective opinion about what is the best way to run a nation. And it's amazing to me, and I don't know if it's in your book, but I'm about to order your book today. But I read I read the as much as I could online, and I think what's amazing is that they cannot see what is happening with the middle class disappearing right now. Do you touch on that at all?
Not so much the middle class disappearing, but the disappointments that are there 12 years from now, where the country becomes basically socialistic, and the middle class has to see that really they're left out in the cold. So I don't have a chapter dedicated just to that issue, but let me give you some good news here. While I point out this great situation in Siberia, Rose, we don't have to go to Siberia. This is fiction. We don't have to go to Siberia and create that. That's fictional. That's going to be hard to do. But we can have a good ending. And so this is a very brief book. It's only 100 pages or so. I deliberately kept it short and simple so that the average reader can get through it very quickly and get the main points. It's not this long intellectual argument. There's a lot of those out there right now already. But this is a quick story to get the point across. And here, the good thing is that the last chapter, very short, has a surprise ending. And my point is that at the very end of all this, that I can be optimistic that there is a way through this. And that's what I point out in the very last chapter. Now, I'm not going to tell you what that ending is, but to me is a very hopeful sign and an optimistic sign that there is a way out here.
So your target audience is mostly conservative, middle conservative?
Well, no, I think it's to the average American voter, who's probably the average person is fundamentally moderate. I think there are a lot of moderate Democrats who can vote Republican, and in the last election there were so-called suburban women that didn't like Trump and they voted Democratic. So I think there's a big vote in that middle that can go either way. And that's what I'm kind of targeting, is that we get this country back in balance a little bit, and that basically that vote is going to be very important in the November elections. I mean, if we have a Democratic president, a Democratic Congress, the progressives are going to put a lot of things through that are very hard to ever repeal. And so I just want to see some balance in all this. That's part of the answer. But there is a way through. We've had a history. We've had a history of how this country was formed. A lot of that history, Rose, is not being taught in the schools. But we had some brilliant people here. I mean, right now it's like slavery got into the big issue. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and all those great people, and unbelievable people. A lot of them that had slaves, they're bad people all of a sudden in the eyes of the progressive. But there's a tremendous beginning of this country like nowhere else. And I think you know that, and you've said that yourself, how great America is. And there is a way out here.
Yeah, I believe, that there is a difference between my grandparents, who all came here from Europe on boats long ago.
Yep.
And they told me, and that's why I mentioned that if you have grandparents or parents, now's the time to record their political opinions and what they lived through, because they're walking history of America.
Yes.
And what it was like back then, because you have to know what was in the past to know how we got to the present. And
you're right. That's what's not being taught enough in the schools. They're not teaching history enough.
No, they aren't.
You're right.
Because, I mean, you have to know, your past. You can't just say this is how it always was. It's not how it always was. It wasn't how we got there. I mean, there was a young man on YouTube, and he was saying, that it's all the baby boomers' fault and da-da-da-da-da, that we're in this mess. And so I texted him, and I said, not texted him, I emailed him, posted it, and I said, please talk to your grandparents and your parents and your great-grandparents if you have them, and find out about the history that they lived through in America so that you could be free and speak out on YouTube and social media today. And I said, and why others are silenced. And I said, and before, you blame the baby boomers who fought for this country so you could be free to speak out. And so, but my point was that it is, it is important for the young people to know what the history is of this great country and what their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents went through, and the wars and the Depression and everything. And if they don't know that, how are they going to understand, Roger?
Yep. You are 1,000% correct. In some of my prior work, I went back to study in history that maybe we as upright humans have been around for 200,000 years. 200,000 years, but so-called civilization only started about 10,000 years ago when we learned how to domesticate some animals. We learned how to grow wheat and so forth, and corn and rice, and all of a sudden we were able to develop language. Intellectuals began to talk to each other. We began to write things down. Can you imagine? That's only 10,000 years ago out of 200,000. And yet then all the major religions, the big six that exist today, were all formed in only 3,000 years. Judaism about 2,500 years before Christ, all the way to, say, Muhammad, 600 years after Christ. Buddhism, Confucianism, Hinduism, they were all formed in that period. Well, why? If you look at most of these religions, it was to set forth rules for man's behavior. What the leaders thought was man can misbehave. By human nature, we can be disorderly. And that goes through all the way to today. If you don't understand history, if you don't understand human nature, and you wonder why some people can just go up the deep end and be disorderly, my gosh, that's been in our genes for hundreds of thousands of years. At one time, we were violent. If someone attacked us, if someone wanted to take our loved ones away or our food away, we had an instinct to be violent and protect. Also, we had the instincts to be cooperative. When that paid off, when that was to our advantage, we had the instinct to be cooperative, and that instinct is still there today. So you have to understand that some people, for whatever reason, in their little personal history, have a tendency to be disorderly. Put 10 kids together without the teacher around, right? Rose, have you ever seen 10-year-olds? Put 10-year-olders in a room without any teacher, without any supervision, without any rules. It can be very disorderly, right? And so that's part of our human nature.
Elementary school.
There's not enough history being taught here to see what we're all about, number one, and number two, how we created this phenomenal country, America. If you can look around, the world is pretty disorderly, right? And yet,
I always say, Roger, if people aren't trying to leave America to go to China or Russia or Siberia or Cambodia or North Korea, they're all trying to get into our country, So how bad is our country if everybody else in the world wants to come here? My daughter and I and my granddaughter, we went to Europe in 2018, thank God, before all this COVID thing happened. And we had a great experience in education and the architecture and the art. And, oh, my God, it was beautiful. I loved it. Yeah. And but everywhere we went, they said, we love America. We want to come to America. We wish we were in America. We love Trump, believe it or not. That's what they said. We love Trump. And we want Trump for our president. It was the craziest thing ever, you know. And we were like so shocked because we heard so much that, you know, they were so anti-American. But that wasn't the case when we visited anyway. And they just loved the fact that we were from America, and they treated us wonderfully. And we were so excited to hear them so happy about America, where in the news, if you want to call it news, we hear so much negativity about America. Do you think, Roger, I'm sorry to get off your topic here, forging a new America, but it is part of a new America.
It is.
Do you think that, well, let me ask you this, because you're an intelligent author and scholar here. So how do you think we can bring back the love and respect for our country if our leaders don't show it?
Oh, boy, if our leaders don't show it. Good point. Why don't we have a George Washington, Thomas Jefferson type person in the White House these last many years? Where are those people? So maybe we have to there's some very intelligent, qualified people out there that perhaps don't want to get into politics. It takes so much money today in politics. Now, I have a friend named Dr. Oz. Have you ever heard of Dr. Oz?
Oh, sure.
Emmett Oz?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Oz stopped his show after 13 successful years the day he announced he's going into politics. He's running for the Senate, the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. He lives very close to me. I play golf with him. I sponsored him into a golf club. And I said, are you prepared to take all the flack that you're going to get? You're going to be attacked for whatever reason. You've been a great guy. The women of this country love you as a doctor and all the advice you've given. Are you prepared for the attack? He said, I am. He said, I'm a conservative, and I'm going to stand up for conservative principles. And I think, Rose, there aren't enough people that are taking that risk today. There aren't enough people willing to put themselves out there to take the flack. And I really admire Mehmet for doing that, because it's tough. It's going to be tough for him and anybody who runs for office. And there's money involved.
And I think I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think that, you know, more people like us need to keep doing what we're doing and support them and give them hope. Yeah. I mean, I donate whatever I can. I can't donate to everybody, but I donate, you know, whatever I can to the candidates I research and look at their votes and what did they vote for. Are they telling the truth? You know, I'm even talking conservatives. And because we have rhinos, you know, we don't tell the truth of what they're standing for. So I try to be really careful because, you know, we're all on budgets. But we have to do whatever we can do to provide them that support and to encourage them and keep them in the process. And we need younger people too, because to be mentored, you know, and to become great leaders like we've had in the past. And before we got so progressive and so liberal and so immoral, I'm sorry, but I think the country's immoral right now. And they're not teaching kids to respect themselves, to respect boys and girls, respecting each other. I mean, it's a free-for-all. And I think, you know, the media needs to be reined in, and I don't, you know, I mean, that's just my personal opinion, but I think it all works together if you want to have a civilized nation. I don't see a civilized nation as we had in the past. Our borders are open. They're flooding in with guns and drugs and fentanyl, and that destroys the minds of the youth, which is an enemy, I mean, a foreign enemy agenda. And so this is what I'm talking about is if we don't have the people at the top upholding the law, Roger, and respecting the Constitution and our law enforcers who are risking their lives at the borders, what do you think the solution could be to?
Well, we have to get more people, like I mentioned, Dr. Oz, an honest person who says honestly which side he's on. And he's lived the American dream. His parents came in from Turkey. He's the only person at the University of Pennsylvania that has ever gotten an MD degree at the same time he got an MBA degree. You know, a lot of doctors later on go back and get an MBA. He did it at the same time. To answer your question, I think we have to encourage that type of person. He's a live example of it, where it just happened. He just announced. We need more people like that to go into politics so that we eventually get people at the top that really understand our history, the greatness of America. My younger son was dating a girl trying to get into this country and stay here from Russia. And I asked her, this is just a year ago, I said, Irina, why are you so interested in coming to America? Can you tell me why you're trying to get out of Russia and come to America? And she looked at me for a second and she said, you have freedom here. Freedom. Now, I think a lot of American kids, Rose, don't understand what the heck freedom means. So I think there has to be a more messaging out there by good leaders who can really tell you what the American dream is all about, what America is really standing for, why we excel in this world. And really, freedom's a hard word to define. A lot of these kids don't know what the heck it means. They've got freedom. A lot of them have freedom, but they don't know where it came from or really what it means and how difficult it was to get it. Here's this little girl coming from Russia. Why is she here? For freedom. That's simple. And
it is exactly the truth, because that is part of what some of the young people said in Europe. They were saying that's why they wanted, they liked Trump, because they could see that he was for freedom and he was for the people and helping the small businesses and all races, whether you were Hispanic or black or whatever. He was helping everybody, and he wasn't even taking a salary, and he was donating it. And no other, all these politicians who have become extremely wealthy somehow, God bless them, are still taking taxpayer wages and pensions, and they have like $100 million or $300 million. I'm like, how much money do you need?
Well, maybe to help answer your question, one feeling I have is that for every strong reaction, there's a reaction, basic laws of chemistry. And if you look when a very inexperienced president like Obama came in, a lot of support from the liberal side, the progressive side, the Democratic side. But what did it do? Because he was so inexperienced, it created the Tea Party as something against him. Then when a strong guy like Trump comes in that you just mentioned, he's so strong on all those points you just mentioned that the progressive liberal side and the media side, the strong reaction was just the opposite. How are we going to get this guy? We're going to create all kinds of conspiracy stories and Russia collusion and what a bad guy he is. He didn't pay his taxes. So I have a Republican friend that called me, I think before the last election, and said, I got to go with Biden because Trump didn't pay any income taxes. I said, where did you get that information? He said, I read the New York Times. He only paid $400 in income taxes. I said that was a filing fee. It had nothing to do with his income taxes. But all of a sudden you get these strong reactions. So maybe the point is, if there's a strong reaction, I think it's happening right now in San Francisco, as I read this morning, the strong reaction from the Democratic mayor is, hey, I can't put up with this crime anymore. This crime is going crazy. And they just had 3 members of the school board that were outvoted out of office by a 4-to-1 ratio when only 6% of the voters in San Francisco are Republican. That's all. And yet the population just voted these school members out of office because they had gone too far progressive. So maybe that's part of our great hope, Rose, is that for every strong action, there's a reaction, a strong reaction. And if the progressives go too far to the left, there's going to be a pushback to the right. And maybe that's our great hope, other than me just writing this book.
No, I think I love it. Forging a New America, how American liberals and climate change landed us in Siberia.
Yeah,
it makes me laugh because the Siberia, I love that.
Yeah, well, it's to catch your attention.
Well, we were isolated. Come on, they have isolated us. It is
right.
kind of a Siberia.
Yes.
But I mean, and then they're saying, if you don't get jabbed, you can't go in Canada. I think there's another country too. You can't go into the grocery store and buy groceries. I'm like, so they're going to starve you to death. How's that health care?
Yeah,
what kind of health care is that?
Well,
it's also absurd and hypocritical. I'm just like mind boggled with the whole thing. But so, what is your next step as a semi-retired author?
Semi-retired only because I've written 4 novels now, and I'm still on the board of directors of a company, and that's exciting for me. We meet every month or talk on Zoom lately every month, and I've been trying to help this company. It needs some help cash-wise. A lot of the business is overseas, and overseas with COVID, kind of everything was on hold. So the company's struggling, and I try to help them with my background, cash management, and that's kind of what I mean by semi-retired. I'm still involved in the business world. I have an older son who's an MD, PhD, and he's always starting new ventures. He's a real smart guy starting new ventures. I help him. So I guess that's what I mean by semi-retired. And I play a lot of golf. I have to keep myself active physically and mentally.
Yes. And speaking of just a little tidbit here, my daughter's in marketing and sales with a huge company. And she said that, like China is, increasing the tariffs so much and for Americans, and that they are withholding like chips for the automobiles, or they own these particular steel parts that they make for this particular company, and they have like quadrupled the price. And so I'm just, so this whole thing is just what it's doing is it's causing them to raise their prices and change everything and then pass it on to the consumer. And so we're seeing this, people are wondering why we're seeing this inflation, but the outsourcing to foreign enemy nations only benefited the people on Wall Street, not the consumers and the middle class, because we're the ones who have to pay the excessive cost when these foreign nations become upset with us. And that was another reason I wanted to mention why I was upset that Trump was they gave Trump so much harassment and attacks and threats and everything else to take the focus and cause him to take a focus off of what he was doing, which was bringing China under control, and so that we could maintain and bring back the economy and help out the small businesses. And so when you mentioned small businesses, I just wanted to pass that on. That these outsourcing to foreign enemy nations, in my opinion, was never a great thing to do.
we went over
made in USA.
You got it. We went overboard, and China was very clever. And it wasn't until Trump that we woke up a little bit. I can go back to a personal story. 1984, a company that I was with had new business in China with our engineer. We were an engineering company. We helped Kellogg build 17 fertilizer plants because they needed better fertilizers for their big population. And all that went well. And we said, to provide service, we'll be back once a year to provide engineering service for all these installations. They said, no, you won't be back. Sit down in a room. You're going to teach us your technology to our engineers, and you're never to come back. And that was absolutely stealing our technology. Now, that goes back to 1984 when they created these 8 capitalist zones, and they encouraged European and American companies and even Russian companies to come in and build these little factories where they had cheap labor, good engineering, which they stole with their cheap labor, and then they became this big, huge manufacturing country, right? So you're right. We were importing all these products from China. We outsourced big industry to China and little industry to China, all kinds of industry to China. And then Trump's the first guy to realize we're being taken to the cleaners, right? We've lost all these good American jobs, and eventually those prices are going to go up. They started out cheap because of their cheap labor, but then as time goes on, the prices go up and up and up, and now they're really hitting us hard right now. So
well, the auto lots,
way back.
The auto lots were empty. A lot of them because I just had very few cars because. Especially Ford, they couldn't get the chips for the new cars.
They can't get the chips, right.
Yeah,
exactly
and
right.
So they are trying to hurt us and take us down, in my opinion. That means that we are aiding and abetting foreign enemy nations and all these secret deals that are going on that are being swept under the carpet. I mean, do they really think America? I think they do, the people that are involved. I really think they think we're that stupid and ignorant of what is happening. But I think that, when Trump was like, oh, he's not going to run in 2015. He's just, he's going to drop out. And that's all I heard. I had huge followings on Facebook and huge. So I had a voice. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to start a movement on Facebook.
Good.
And so I put up there, I said, and I kept repeating it, sinks into people's heads eventually. And I
That's
said,
good.
Vote for Trump. I said, he is not a politician. He's not a lawyer. He's a businessman. And I said, and what America needs is a businessman. And so first people didn't catch on, but eventually it was going all over the place.
Good.
And it's
good for
true.
You.
No, it's true.
And Donald Trump, I remember, he said the same thing about America 30 years ago. 30 years ago,
wow.
Nothing to do with politics. When he was interviewed, he always talked about the problems with America, and they have to be fixed. I mean, he had an insight into all this many, many years ago. And it's amazing that he had that, whereas the media has him made up as though he's a dictator, right? He's a dictator. That's the political problem he has, is that there are people going to believe that. I mean, if you watch CNN and only watch CNN, you would think he's the worst person in the world, right? And then you go to Fox and they're beating on Biden, but for many good reasons, because now even the Democrats are biting on him, and the polls are showing how weak he is in the polls. But it's hard to get accurate news reporting, and there are some people that say they're going to watch only CNN or only read the New York Times, and they're not going to get both sides of the story.
No, and that's the important thing, and that's what I told the professor. I said, if you're not going to teach, and not in the class, I didn't tell him. I said, but if the school isn't going to teach, the universities and colleges and high schools aren't going to teach kids both sides of the story and what happened in the past and how their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents and how they suffered to get to the present so everybody could be free, I said, they're not going to understand what freedom is all about and that it's not free. And we all have to make an effort to make sure that our children and grandchildren and future generations will maintain that reason why they must do the same and get involved. And that was, my opinion. Yeah. But I love your storyline. I love your book, Forging a New America. And
well, I hope to do more radio, and I hope to do some TV before November if I can get on TV. And so I'll be pushing hard here to get the story out. Yeah. But thank you, Rose, very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye. And Roger Colley has left the building, and Rose Colombo will have to leave the building as well. But remember, injustices can happen to you, and they can happen to me. But together, we can make a positive difference. Remember that you are never alone when you tune in to Colombo Chronicles every Wednesday from 12 to 1 p.m. And before I go, let me touch on a couple of highlights here. New York Times changes tune, admits that unvaccinated at less risk than vaccinated. And the next trend is U.S. government hired contractors to secretly fly illegal immigrants to New York at night. Former CEO of oil company gets 60 months in prison, 5 years. Lori Lightfoot openly bribing Chicago residents to get COVID-19 vaccine. Did you know that coercion, threats, and fear-mongering are crimes on the United States law books? You cannot force someone to do something if they are under duress. And coercion, threats, and fear-mongering and threatening to fire people from their jobs is actually a crime on the U.S. law books. Release the transcript tops Twitter after Ukrainian president slams Biden over botched call. Yale students say anonymous reporting system has turned schools into Orwellian surveillance state. And that's exactly what we were talking about. And so let's see if we can turn back the clock and still move forward by getting involved with our government. And the way you can get involved with your government is on the city level, the county level, and the state level. If you do it city by city and county by county and state by state, in every state around the nation, you will make a huge change in your state. And you can save the freedoms and the constitutional rights, liberties, free will, and freedom to choose and control your own bodies and minds and make your own decisions about your own body and your own mind and that of your minor children. It should never become a choice of the government to use human beings as human lab rats under duress of fear-mongering, threats, and coercion, and threatening to fire you from your job. There are laws in the United States of America. They're called the Necessities of Life. The Necessities of Life laws include, and don't forget this and look it up, it includes education, it includes food, medicine, travel, and work. And these are, and shelter. You need to remember that in America, you have the Necessities of Life laws, and the violations of those necessities of life are constitutional violations as well as human rights violations. And it would be child shelter and feed your children. And that decision should never be imposed by the government or by the court system or a criminal, because that's what criminals do. They threaten, coerce, and fearmonger to get their victims to do whatever they want them to do in exchange for what they want, which borders on extortion by telling them they will be punished. So your right to a free will and a free choice was at birth, and it was a natural right granted by God and an inalienable right granted to every human being on the planet. So remember that. And God bless you. God bless America. God bless our first responders, our law enforcers. God bless our military, and God bless everyone in the entire world. May God keep his hand on America, and may God keep his hand on you. Bye-bye.
Rose Colombo is signing off, and she's left the building. Be sure to bookmark and share Colombo Chronicles Live every Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. on the West Coast. Or if you're sleepless in the big city, that would be 11 to midnight on the East Coast. Rose Colombo says, remember, you're never alone when you tune in every Wednesday to Colombo Chronicles.